Okay, there we go. We got a mic check in. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, wait. Okay, I'm going to have to do this again. Do I have teachers in the room? Teachers, could you put your hands up for me? Any teachers, educators? Okay. So right here in the corner, you know the call and response, right? You tell the class, good afternoon, and they respond? Ah, look at that. You all look so amazing. Good afternoon to you. I'm Birchelle Edmay. I work with Fox 59 News. Typically, I would tell you, see you on TV at 5, 6, and 10, but instead, I get to see you in person, and it's truly my pleasure to be with you all here for the inaugural event of She Leads Conference, which is hosted by the City of Carmel's Mayor, Sue Finkam. So this event is more than just a gathering. It is truly a movement. And She Leads is dedicated to leadership, empowerment, advancement, development, and service. And today we come together as leaders, mentors, and change makers to support and uplift one another. So we do have a powerful, engaging evening and afternoon for you, and an inspiring day ahead. Now, one of the things that we will be doing is fueling your leadership journey and challenging you to think about how we can empower this next generation of women who lead. So here's some things that you can expect. A conversation over lunch with Mayor Finkam, a panel discussion featuring 4 incredible women sharing their insights and their experiences, a keynote address from a local author and communications trailblazer, and a giveaway from a local business for leadership coaching sessions. There's also some time for you to continue networking, connecting with the vendors that are outside in the lobby, and enjoying some fun experiences. So think permanent jewelry, a photo booth, and more. And now something special on your tables. You likely already found them, so if you've already dug into the goodie bags, that's okay. But if you haven't, take a look. You'll see some purple bags there, as well a postcard. And this is a chance for you to reflect and pay it forward. So we want you to take a moment during the day to write a message to your middle school self. I love this. This is probably actually my favorite part of today. Not just because you have to be forced to think about that young girl in you, but also the way it will connect to this next generation. So here's what I want you to do. You need to share a piece of wisdom, offer encouragement, and write something that you wish you knew at that age when you were in middle school. And this is where the fun begins, because these postcards will be collected, and after our panel discussions and our lunch and all the fellowship that we do here, it'll be shared with middle school girls who will be attending the next session of She Leads. So all of the words that you're writing, the things that you're thinking about now, will then again inspire the next generation of leaders. So we're paying it forward. So really be intentional about what you're writing here on these postcards and make it count. So with that, we want to get started here. It's my honor to introduce Mark Labar from our presenting sponsor, Duke Energy. He's going to share a few words. So please join me in welcoming Mark to our stage.
Well, good afternoon again. And I have promised Mayor Finkam that next time I will wear lavender. Well, it's so good to be here with you today. We're excited to be a sponsor, and looking out the doors, it's great to see that in addition to you all being here today, it's sunny outside, and a great day is ahead. So I have a video to show, but before I do, I'd like to talk about some work we've been doing across the state, in addition to supplying energy to our over 900,000 Indiana customers. So, for example, since 2015, we've been working cooperatively with our economic development partners and landed almost 34,000 new jobs and over $25 billion of capital investment. In 2024, our Duke Energy Foundation awarded nearly $2.1 million in shareholder funding to Indiana nonprofit community organizations, and some of those are represented here today. Last year, our team supported more than 40 low-income focused events working with 15,000 customers. And our Indiana employees and retirees gave more than $274,000 to charitable organizations and nearly 14,000 hours of volunteer time. And our company match for employee giving and volunteering was just over $411,000. And finally, Duke Energy dedicated over $650,000 of financial assistance to our Share the Light Fund to help customers having difficulty paying their electric bills. And now I'd like to share this video featuring our Duke Energy Indiana president, Stan Pinniger. And thank you so much and enjoy the day.
Duke Energy is more than just an electrical provider for us, or keeping the lights on, so to speak. They are the first call we make when we're working on business development. The projects we're working need more land, they need bigger buildings, they need it yesterday. Duke Energy is a great resource for allowing us to move those projects along faster.
Beyond the provision of reliable, affordable power, which we'll never lose sight of, we have a huge stake in the success of our communities, and we want to be part of that. We want our communities to thrive. We want them to grow. We have what I would call a top-tier group of economic development professionals who work throughout our 69 counties. They work closely with regional and local economic development organizations every day to look for opportunities to bring new growth, new jobs to these communities.
I feel very grateful for being able to work with Duke Energy team and for my own community to make it more prosperous while I can.
There's always opportunities to make an impact around our service territory, whether it be food, whether it be immediate needs and shelter.
Duke Energy has been a great partner for us for a long time, starting with providing sponsorships for some of our events, making financial contributions, helping out as a volunteer group.
Through Duke Energy, we are able to come up with innovative ideas. They're being good neighbors. They're reaching out and volunteering, providing funds to help us do our work, so that way we can empower folks for them to fulfill their potential.
We do a variety of projects, too many to name really, but it can be anything from trash cleanups to volunteering at a shelter, volunteering at a humane society. It runs the gamut. We have an opportunity to make an impact, I believe, for both our customers and communities that we serve. And I think that we do that. And we'll continue to focus on those areas in years to come.
Let's give a round of applause there to Mark and Duke Energy. Thank you for your support here of today's event and within the community as well. And before we move forward with our program, we do want to recognize some of our other sponsors here. I'm going to ask that you hold your applause, but if you are a representative of any of the organizations that I list, please stand. Do not be shy. We want to make sure that you get your spotlight here today. So we're recognizing Lucas Oil, IU Indy, IU Health, Runbaum Construction, Ascension St. Vincent, Lake City Bank, Advisa, Spoke Note, HWC Engineering. Okay, I heard that. Woo, they're excited. Gather Management Group, Fager Drinker, Pacer Sports and Entertainment, C. Scarig, and the Indiana Women's Running Festival. So if you are a representative of any of these groups, again, please stand so we can recognize you, and please join me in applauding. It is now my honor to welcome our leader who has spearheaded this event and initiative now, Carmel's Mayor, Sue Finchem.
She's a little taller than me. Good morning, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to see you all here today. There were people who said that we didn't have a need for this type of session, that women wouldn't be interested, that we didn't have enough content to fill a program, and you proved them wrong. We sold it out. 350 women here today, so thank you very much for coming, and next year we'll make sure to have more space. I'm super excited also because of your attendance today. We have 175 middle school girls coming free of charge at 4 o'clock. So when you get a chance, if you're on your way out and you see some girls, make sure you welcome them and inspire them, encourage them for being here. It's exciting because we're going to feed tomorrow's leaders as well. So I'm excited about today. You know, when I was campaigning, and also since I've been in office for a year, I felt a thirst from women in the community to have more of a network. to build into each other and to grow Carmel and to take more of a leadership position in that. So super excited to get that started today. We hope to do something in the fall, maybe maybe more of a networking event, maybe with one speaker, and then repeat this annually in February. So thanks for being at the inaugural one. Thanks for having a vision. Thanks for building into yourself, pouring into yourself for leadership. I know it's something I work on continually with myself. I can never get enough information on how to be a better leader. So hopefully we provide some great information for you today. Also, please do fill out your postcards. Don't forget to do that. If you didn't find it, it's underneath your dessert plate. They hid it there, just, not that you're not going to miss dessert, but it's there. And make sure you fill it out because we're going to make sure you get it back later. So thank you again for being here today, and let's have a great day.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and we'll continue to have conversations with her. Actually, we're going to do a one-on-one interview talking about leadership, but first we want to make sure that you are fulfilled in your stomachs as well as your spirit, so please enjoy the lunch. We'll take a little bit of break, and we'll be right back. So we're going to invite you to keep on enjoying your meal that you have at the table. Is it good? Is it great? Yeah? We're liking it? We're loving it? I'm seeing some head nods, and I'm also seeing complete attention to your plate, so I'm going to assume that everything is going well. So we wanted to welcome and invite you back into our conversation here with Mayor Sue Finkam. It's not often that we get to have a free reign here, 30 minutes to sit and talk with the mayor and learn a little bit about her story. So we hope that while you're eating, you can pay attention here toward our stage as we get to know our mayor just a little bit more. And so to do that, I'm going to go off script. So I'm sorry to our organizers who literally wrote everything down and are watching me go rogue as our producers do often. And now I don't have an earpiece to tell me not to. So we're going to keep going alongside with that. But it's often rare that we get to hear the story, the becoming, and how you get to the point you're at now. And because politics is such a male-dominated field, it's important to know the context and the history behind your story. So what is that story and why politics?
It was certainly never anything that was on my work plan. I went to school for sports medicine in college and really felt I'd be in the healthcare field for a long time, evolved from sports medicine, caregiving to communications. But ultimately, I ran for city councilor because I didn't like the city councilor that was in my district. And what we're going to talk about today is when you see an opportunity, take it and just go for it. And so I thought, well, I'm at least going to give him a run for his money. And if he wins, then so be it. I'll learn from that and move forward. And if I win, then I have to get super serious about what it takes to be a city councilor, right?
And so you get to that position there. But before you're even a city councilor, what drove you into sports medicine? What made you want to go into that healthcare area in that field?
I have this knack for finding male-dominated fields to go into.
I was going to say, it seems like a trend here.
Yeah, sports medicine. Then I went into ergonomics, which is in manufacturing, largely. And then, of course, being an elected official. I was an okay athlete in high school, but it was really about performance improvement. That was really interesting to me. For how do you care for an athlete and improve their performance? How do you have a hand in that? How do you be part of a team in a different way, just not being on the field? And I think that applies to so many different occupations. You're a team member. How do you contribute, even if you may not be the central player, so to speak? And it was a great mix match for me and my personality. And again, gave me an opportunity to then springboard into injury prevention in the industrial setting, and then communication. So my first thought was I'm going to go into business, but there was really no one. I grew up in a small town in Michigan. There was really no role models in my town that were business leaders that were female. The business leaders were teachers, which are fantastic, and retail owners, but they were all men. So I think I might have actually maybe plunged into business, or maybe had at least more of an interest in it if I knew somebody and saw somebody that did that. But I didn't have that. Same thing for military. There was a lot of people in my small town that went into the military, and I think Air Force and other things were intriguing to me, but I didn't know any females that were in that. So I think that if you see it, you can be it is important, having, from my experience personally.
So truly the power of representation.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the sports and how you played, and I'm afraid to ask if you are also in a male-dominated sport. What sport was it?
Basketball, softball.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there we are. And I know I'm an advocate as well for sports and the way that it really shapes women and girls, because it's the first time you are really working with other people and you're able to kind of find your own voice, but oftentimes lead as well. Were you the point guard?
No, I was not. I was a defender.
Okay, so she was blocking the shots.
I was pitcher.
Okay,
though.
all right,
So-
there we are. And so you move from sports, you go into the world kind of navigating with health and business, and then you move into council. When you're there, how do you hone in some of the passions that you have and move into politics and really excel?
Well, I think when you're a city councilor, I'm going to pause here for a moment too and recognize two of our city councilors that are here, Teresa Ayers and Shannon Menard. Let's stand up, ladies. There we go. Teresa is a Central District council member. Shannon is a Northeast District council member. When you're elected to any position, you represent others. That is your role.
Yeah.
And you're elected based on that group, whether it be a district or a whole city or whatever it be, their belief in your ability to represent them appropriately. So I think you have to keep your values strong, but also then make sure that you're listening and coordinating with your representative body, whatever that is, to make sure you clearly understand what they want and need.
And so the transition there, while you do have a focus, you went in knowing I don't like my representation,
Yeah.
but I really want to make an impact in my community. The transition from kind of corporate and business world into politics, what did that look like?
Well, in one respect, it was easy because I was very involved in trade organizations as an athletic trainer and as a businesswoman. And so I was a national committee chair for the National Athletic Trainers Association, representing 25,000 athletic trainers in a particular area. So in that respect, I was already doing the similar work, where I was representing their occupation and making sure that their needs were represented to the national body and to the market. On the other side, it was very challenging because in the corporate setting, you're used to working with a committee and maybe coming to consensus and making sure that you're working together as a team and getting goals. Well, you're more like the United Nations as a body, as a member of a body like a city council or a state legislature, than you are a committee. And so it took a little bit saying, it's okay if I disagree. It's okay if I don't voice my concern. I don't have to be on the same page as them. A little harder at state legislature when they've got a caucus to, to report to, and but that was kind of a big hurdle for me to get over. I know the first time I had a vote, the first time you had to literally press a button, or in our case, it was a voice vote when I first was on city council. It's scary. And I didn't
Why is it
realize you had
scary?
to like a gulp and say aye. Because I'm on the record. Now it's easy to be, especially in today's world, anonymous on Facebook and throwing trash somewhere. But to actually just be very visible and very accountable to what every single vote you have is very interesting. Now I love it. But the first one I had to take was a significant, I felt at the time, risk.
And how do you find your voice, that moment inside when you're taking the vote that tells you deep down what you align with and how do you represent your community? How did you find your voice in those moments?
Well, again, values. You have to know what your values are. If you've been listening and paying attention, you know what your community wants. Sometimes the vocal ones, the very vocal remonstrators do not align with your values, and so that's a challenge. You may be going against what a vocal minority wants in your community, but what you feel in your heart and your soul and your gut is the right thing to do for the long-term benefit of the community. Those are hard, and oftentimes you have a vote where you've got great people, just good humans on either side of the debate, so to speak. But every decision you make, and we see this in corporate world as well, every decision you make divides. Even if you're a soccer mom and you got the kids in the back, I'm gonna go pizza and I want, hamburgers. You're gonna win with some and lose with others. And it's no different when you're on city council or another body. So every decision divides, and you just have to make sure you're grounded to make sure you can sleep.
So you move from city council and you decide, I want to keep pressing forward and I want to run for mayor. What was that decision like, and why mayor?
It was a long decision. I think I dabble with it, a couple times. I was on city council for 12 years. A couple times, is this something I would want to do? But really, when I started my business in 2020, I felt like I was putting that decision behind me, that I wasn't going to do that. But I just felt like even though I started my business in 2020, it just shot out of the cannon, super successful, and I felt like I still wasn't fulfilled. There was something else missing. I wasn't going to run for council again because I felt like 3 terms was plenty. And so there's this little voice saying, I think you can achieve more. I think you can give more. You can lead more at a higher level. And so the question to me was, is it going to be in the corporate setting by doing something else with my business, or is it going to be in the public service realm and run for mayor? And I was at 95% run for mayor for a long time, and that last step and making it publicly known was again challenging. But I think that I felt like my style and my background and experience matched really well with where Mayor Brainerd was leaving us off. And I just felt like it would be more of a seamless transition and really good for the community.
What values did you want to transition from council into the mayor's office?
Well, first of all, community. The value of community is really important to me. And so I hope you've seen in the last year that we've tried to get more people involved, more women involved, more voices at the table. We have 106,000 people here. And many of you have heard me say this before, 100 different languages from 90 different countries, very diverse community. I want to make sure that every single person who wants to feel included gets an opportunity. So that was first and foremost. Of course, we want to do great things with the dollars that we're blessed to be able to have through revenue, which I realize are your dollars coming to us, and it's a responsibility that we have. So I want to make sure we're very transparent about that and make sure, we're stewarding those very carefully. And then also, again, I believe a mayor should be the promoter, right, of the community. And so just really telling Carmel's story in a different way that Mayor Brainerd had told it. And he did an amazing job building this community with an incredible built environment. But I felt what we weren't telling the story about enough was the people that are sitting here in this community. You all, whether you're business owners or business leaders, whether you're a Girl Scout troop leader, whatever it is you're doing, we hadn't done a good enough job to do that. So that's what we've tried to promote and persuade a little bit about why Carmel is incredible and offers an opportunity for people to really live out their dreams, no matter what those dreams are. Because everyone comes here with a dream. They come here to get their kids in our incredible school system. They come here to start a business because we've got an amazing marketplace. They come here to have a safety on their streets. And by the way, we've got some public safety members here as well. I don't know where they're sitting. I see some right here. Our police and fire members, would you please stand? Stand up, ladies. Where's Renee? There we go. Thank you. So whether they're coming here to make sure that they can, roll their kid out the front door and make sure they're gonna be safe, and have an incredible experience down the road with their friends, and not have to worry about their safety. And that's a dream that people have. And I think it's incumbent upon myself, City Council, and the rest of our leadership team to never ever forget what people came here to do.
So you move forward with your values and the vision you have for the city of Carmel, but as you're doing so, you are coming off of a long tenure in the mayor's office. What are some of the challenges that you saw in making difficult transitions and your choices forefront?
Well, luckily we were in great shape during the handoff, so to speak. I think the challenge with any time you follow a longtime leader, think Matt Painter at Purdue following Gene Cady, right? You have built a culture. And so it's maybe unwinding that culture a little bit and changing direction. You run the risk of having people say, well, we've always done it that way. I think as a leader following a long-term leader, you're gonna have to push the boundaries a little bit and recognize that you may have a vision of how you want something to go. You may try it, it may not work. Oh well, you try again, right? Failure is just another lesson, and so we're never gonna be perfect and roll anything out, but I think it's really important to say, this is something we wanna align with that is a different path. One of the things we've been working a lot on is I felt like our community, our city government was very siloed by department. And Mayor Brainerd had run a very, what I would call, decentralized shop, if you will, where the department director could control their own destiny for their department. And we're trying to run a more centralized operation. So you can't hire and fire without getting HR involved. You can't buy software without getting IT involved from a cybersecurity risk. We can't do events without getting public safety involved, right? We have to have this interaction because we're better for it. It goes back to belongingness inside the walls of City Hall and, connection inside the walls of City Hall. So that, along with culture change, takes a long time. But you have to be persistent and consistent and just know where you're headed.
Well, because we are a room full of mostly ladies here and focused on women who are leaders, when you were looking to make some of those changes and you're talking about 3 to 4 decades of the same thing, and here you are saying, let's centralize departments, let's turn to this vision, how do you address the pushback that you likely receive, but also honing in on your voice and your power?
Same way you take on community issues, you listen and make sure you're not missing something. And then also you measure to make sure what you're trying to do is effective. And also you educate. This is why it's important. Now, I think the challenge we have, if you have a business of 10 people, it's a little easier to cascade a message from top down or bottom up. We have nearly 800 people, so it's harder to make sure that message is cascaded either direction. And I think that's something we just have to be very intentional about. We send out a newsletter from me every 2 weeks, and it is Ask Me Anything. We rarely have people ask, but we do occasionally have a message or a question come back, and that's important to me. And, I'm going around to hit fire stations here coming up, and roll calls again for police. And hitting some department meetings as we go through 2025. We did it in 2024. We'll do it again in 2025. So, again, I think that's important. And, let's be honest, trust takes time to build. I'm a new face inside City Hall, still even after 12 years in City Council and a second year as a mayor, I'm still a new face inside of City Hall. And so I think you have to build trust over time. And those questions will come more freely later. The concerns and pushback will come maybe a little freely later. And also the opportunity to help in a different way. So I welcome all the input. Sometimes we agree with it, sometimes we don't. But I think it's important. We've done a couple climate surveys in departments as an example to get feedback on how are we doing, how's your leadership doing, how's our vision being portrayed, and all that. So I think that's something we keep pushing on too.
So you said that you welcome different input. How do you ensure that all voices are amplified in your office and in the city as well so that Carmel can grow?
I think continually talking about it, first of all. We've talked about community engagement over and over again. We'll continue to do that. We did a big community survey, pushed it out last March, and got 7,200 responses, which is just 3 times what we thought the high water mark would be for a response. We thought we might get 2,500, got 7,200. I used that numerous times in talking to people, most recently talking about the state legislature and their actions around tax reform, saying, hey, the number 3 thing people want is equality community services. They move here for Carmel, and when you're over 65, it's the number 2 item. Public safety runs away with the number 1 item why people move here. So that data has been really valuable to make sure we have. But we've also started a bunch of commissions, and so these are community members that are serving on commissions, a commission for housing, a commission for public safety, a commission for seniors, a commission for veterans and military families. And there's a couple more we want to roll out over time. We're going to take a little bit of a pause because, that takes manpower and an organization.
Woman power as well.
Yeah, yes, girl power. And so we've got to make sure that we're continually looking for ways to get feedback. I'm out and about a lot on purpose. I always get so if you see me out, come say hi, because I get I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm sure you don't want anyone to talk to you. If I didn't want people to talk to me, I wouldn't be having lunch at a restaurant or breakfast at a restaurant or at a public event. The reason I'm out there is to get feedback and say hi to people and get to meet them. So I try to do that, regularly. And we're doing some videos with small business as well. And every single time we do a video with small business or a caffeine trail video, I get just one more piece of information and intel about what it's like to be a small business owner in today's world. And I'm really, passionate about that. My husband's had a business, and I say my husband, we have had a business since 2013. I had my own business as well, and I know it's different one side of the check versus the other. We just had to re-up a loan from my husband's business, and you're putting your house on the line. That's how it works. You have to have a personal guarantee, and I recognize that when we say you've got to have an accessible front entrance and you've got to have a sign of this size, and by gosh, you better make sure you're doing XYZ because it meets code, that those are dollars coming out of someone's pocket that could otherwise get poured into their business. And I think we just have to keep those things in mind. So all those ways to interact is really important to me.
So whether it's business that you've just kind of touched on a little bit here or in the mayor's office, how often have you been asked How do you balance it all?
A lot.
Let me ask the crowd too by raising hands. How often how do you do it all? Hands for women?
Yeah.
Okay. That question is not often asked as well to men. So when you hear that question, how do you respond and why do you think it's important?
Yeah. Balance is a fallacy. I mean, it's a complete joke. There's no such thing as balance. I think it's like a teeter-totter, right? Sometimes you're on this side of the fulcrum, sometimes you're on that side of the fulcrum, but there's no such thing as balance. And I'm sorry, that whole balance thing is just like probably invented by someone who never had to put makeup on during a Zoom call. It's just something you have to do. You have to figure things out. And I think we all have our own answers, right? My son is 23. I don't have him at home anymore. I just have a needy dog and a needy husband. But there's many of you that have multiple kids still at home, and it's hard when you're getting up, you get them on the bus, and you got to get them somewhere, or 6 different sports things at night. And I think you got to do what you is right for you, and again, keeping your values in check. I know it's a little easier now because of the virtual meetings and phone calls and stuff. It was a little harder when Drew was little because you had to have your butt in a seat, 8 to 5. I actually quit a job. I was working downtown Indy, had to be down there 8 through 5. My husband had started his business in 2013, so 2014, he's in Florida most of the time for like 4 months. My son's got to be travel soccer. And those coaches that change practices at the last minute, there's not my favorite people. But, I finally said, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it. I can't be everywhere for everything and succeed. And it just was eating me up inside. And 2 weeks later, I had to get a consulting contract for 30 hours a week that made more than my full-time job. So it was just like, I think it was meant to be. Right? But I had to have the courage to say, time out, this isn't working. I don't care. I think when you're an elected official, every little thing you do is under scrutiny. Oh, she just quit a job. That means she was really fired, but she was, she had to quit or whatever. So every little thing's under scrutiny. But I didn't care. It was like, what was best for me and my family.
So does that mean there are personal ambitions that maybe you've had that you've had to either put on the back burner or accelerate further just to align with your professional ambitions?
Oh, I think there's probably a couple of jobs that I work for some large healthcare organizations. A couple of jobs I didn't apply for because I felt it wasn't a fit for me at that time. But again, it's like you only keep so many balls in the air, so many plates spinning, as the saying goes. And I just felt like it wasn't for me.
Let's go back toward leadership. So part of today's theme is making an impact, a meaningful impact. So what are some of the most impactful leadership lessons that you've learned that you think some of the women who are here today could benefit from and apply to, whether it's their work or their business?
I think don't wait to be asked to do something. I think that women are taught to be good girls when we're little. And good girls mean don't stand out, don't step up, don't be loud, don't do something that you didn't get asked to do. And I think, I had a nice conversation with one of our city employees about 2 months ago, and I'm like, you've got 2 little girls, and we just kind of going back and forth on a couple issues ago. You got 2 little girls. Teach them the permission that they have a thought or an idea to act on it. I think that's the biggest way. If you want to make an impact, just don't wait to be asked. And you've seen the statistics, I'm sure, about when there's a job opening, women will wait till they fit 10 out of 10 qualifications before they apply. Men will apply after 6. 6 out of 10 is a C+ candidate. But they just have this kind of go for it mentality. I don't know if it's the testosterone or how they were trained or what. But the reality is I want you to channel that energy and do that yourself. Take a risk and see what you can do because I think it's really, really valuable.
Now, as a moment of transparency, how long did it take you to get to that point where you just said, I'm going to go for it?
I am one who will read the room a little bit. That's been my style. And so I think that for me, and actually I'll tell you an early experience I had in music that has kind of carried through, and that is I was one of those kids that was like all music, all sports, and I was good academically too, so I didn't really have to worry about that. But I went to this Lions Club to this all-state marching band tryouts, and again, I'm from a tiny town. There's more people in the 2 big apartment buildings in downtown Carmel than there are in my town, and so I went down there with low expectations, and I remember trying out. I hit this high, I think it was an E above the scale. And I ended up getting first chair, which is super cool. I got experience to go to California and march all down the coast. It was just amazing for a kid. We had no money. So amazing for a kid to do that. I'd never flown before, that kind of stuff. So, and I just remember that was so empowering. And our band instructor, who was awesome, said, I knew you could do it. But it's like, why didn't I know that? And so that was just those. And so when your kids are in things, right, sports, music, we talked about sports earlier, there's those experiences they have that can build into business. And it's like, how do we help them channel that into how they can lead across the board? But yeah, I'll read the room a little bit, just because it's my way of like taking an intel, and then I figure out where I can play. So I may not be the first one clumsily through the door leading the charge, but I may be in the middle because I figured it out and now have a voice there.
I think you've already dropped a couple gems, but I'll ask you this specifically here. Is there a piece of advice that shapes your leadership? And on the opposite side, is there a piece of advice you're glad that you didn't follow? And could you share that with us?
Yes. So I love the quote, lead with curiosity, not certainty. A leader never, and that was a former college professor at that one, a leader never knows the situation they're going into, and you may go in thinking one thing and circumstances change. Sometimes we're leading on quicksand, right? So lead with curiosity, not certainty, because I think you have to be able to be, to take a leadership, especially if you're representing people. Like I'm grateful and honored to be able to represent the, almost 800 people that work for the city of Carmel. And so I'm very cognizant of the fact that when I stick my head out in the media or something like that, I'm representing them as well. And they may not all agree with it. But I think I try to lead with the way that I'm curious how we can play, how Carmel's going to be represented, how I can lead over time, not knowing really where we're headed, because you just don't know. None of us have a crystal ball. I have to write this down because I get irritated when I read this. So my favorite quote that my former boss gave me, don't be too ambitious, it may turn people off. Ooh. Let's say it together. I still get mad about that. I was 25.
I'm mad for you.
I know, I was 25, and he was an older businessman who'd had a lot of success. And I kept asking for more responsibility, and how can I help more, and how can I serve here, and what about this, what about that, what about this, probably bothered him a little bit. He'd put me in a leadership position, but, why are you so ambitious? Why do you want more? Why do you want to help here? You have a job. I was like, well, isn't this how we all rise? Mm-hmm. Don't let anyone put your light out, man. I just think that is... and it did for a while. Yeah. It's like, well, maybe I'm being too pushy. Back to good girl. Be a good girl. Don't rock the boat. And thankfully to him, when I got realization about 2 years later, that was a fuel. And it was fueled during the campaign. Whenever I have a motivation, you guys use notes on your phone. I have a motivation notes. And there's some really hateful things in that got me through the campaign. Because it's hard, and I put one there the other day. Someone posted online, a female posted on Twitter, I can't believe there's a woman as mayor in Carmel. She's way too easily influenced. Oh my God, and a woman underneath her said, I agree. I'm like, well, who are you people? Now, they were not Carmel residents, I can tell you that, because I stalked them.
I just found a new story.
Yeah. So those are two, just make sure that, you're being your best you and going for it, and don't let anyone drown out your light.
All right, Mayor Finchem, thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we hope that you guys enjoyed a bit of that one-on-one there. We're going to give a quick break until 1:15, so we're inviting you, please continue networking, head out into the vendors to support some of our local businesses, and then we'll be back here at 1:15 for our panel. All right, it looks like more of our room is seated here and ready for our panel. So just to make sure to give you just a little bit more time here to get to your seats, I'm going to read my postcard. So remember, we want you guys to fill out the postcard so we're able to give it to our middle school students who will be here later in the afternoon and evening. So when you get a little time in between some of these sessions, please make sure to fill out those cards if you haven't already. I did so pretty quickly here and wrote a few words, so this is what I wrote. Hey, you. I'm so glad you leaned into who you are and grew to feel okay standing out and standing up. Don't be afraid to raise your hand and speak. You are unique, you are it, and your voice should be read and heard. So that ended up happening. My voice, in fact, is heard every day, 5, 6, and 10. So again, we're here to start our panel and our discussion, and we're going to be exploring how women navigate career growth, personal passions, and the pursuit of balance. So we're joined now by 4 remarkable women who bring unique perspectives on leadership and innovation. Our moderator is Nadine Dyer. And we can give a round of applause. I want to make sure the ladies feel a little love. And our panelists, Heather Haas, Katie Lucas, and Consuelo Poland Lockhart. So I'll let them each introduce themselves a bit more here and share some of their journeys with you. Please welcome me in joining them here on the stage.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, ladies. How's everyone doing? And gentlemen. Sorry. Well, my name is Nadine Dyer, and I get to be the moderator, and there's just something so refreshing about being in a room full of women. So Mayor Finkham, thank you so much for putting this on. It's incredible. And I know Tiara and Alicia, and there's a whole team behind that does and makes all of this possible, because this is a big event to undertake. So make sure we thank the ladies in the purple t-shirts. Well, I get to moderate this discussion with 3 powerhouse leaders. And at first I wrote female leaders, and then it was like, no, scratch out the female, because it's just leaders in the community. And as mentioned earlier, we have Heather Haas, and we have Katie, and we have Consuelo Poland Lockhart. I just wanted to say that. And she said it earlier, so I was like, I gotta say it. And we have some questions for you. And so the first question is just a brief introduction. We just want to know a little bit about you, and whoever wants to go first is great.
I can dive in. So my name is Heather Haas, and I am the owner and CEO of Advisa, which is a Carmel-based leadership and culture development firm. So I'm native to Carmel. I moved here in 1980, so I've seen a great deal of change happen in this community. And now I'm a wife and a mom of 3, so raising my family right here in Carmel, and wouldn't be anywhere else. So I'm really delighted to be with all of you on this panel.
I'll go. So my name is Consuelo Lockhart. I'm the founder and executive director of Latinas Welding Guild. I've been running the nonprofit for a little bit over 7 years now. I have an art background and kind of just fell in the trades kind of on accident. And I wouldn't have imagined myself making welding my world, essentially. So
Pretty awesome. It's great. Can't wait to hear more.
Hi, I am Katie Lucas, president of Lucas Oil. Born in Carmel, moved all over, and then raising our family here. I have 2 very sweet but hyper-competitive little boys, and just really excited to be here among you all. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, my first question is just to kind of loosen us up. What's one hobby or activity that just helps you recharge outside of work?
You want to just go in order
Yeah,
here?
let's just go in order.
Okay.
Let's keep
However
this
we wanna do
orderly. I like it.
I would like to say that, I get up at 5 a.m. and run, and I'm into marathons and CrossFit, but I'm not. No, for me, if I reflect on what's consistently been part of my life, helped me recharge, it's reading and writing. So for me, reading is a way to dive into other people's stories and explore other worlds and things happening, and it's just very restorative for me. And then writing is really the inward. Journaling and writing for me has always been a source of reflection and just centering for me. So those are the things I would say have been consistent over time.
Yes, that's great. And thanks for keeping it real.
I would say I love alone time. I need that to kind of regroup. Because I'm an introvert, but I think for my role, I have to be an extrovert, so it can be very overwhelming. I also love creating and designing, so I think that for me always recharges my battery. I think those are the 2 main things. Oh, and I just got a rowing machine, so that's also been really nice. So.
Nice. I like it.
I think habits are imperative, and really starting your day with intention. For me, that's something that I have to do. So personally, I start every morning. I try to read a chapter in the Bible every morning, journal, and then something recently is red light therapy, which a side effect of that, which I love, it's quiet, it's peaceful, no phones. So, you start your day with 10 to 15 minutes of solitude and reflection, and it really sets the tone for the whole rest of the day.
Awesome. I'm excited to look into that. Red light therapy. All right. So these are general questions. We'll kind of continue on with everybody, and then we'll zone in on each of you ladies. But many ambitious women struggle with the pressure to have it all, right? We have to have it all together. And I love what Mayor Finkam said earlier. But how do you personally define success, and how has that definition evolved throughout your career?
Yeah, I actually agree with the mayor that have it all thing is a bit of a mirage, and it's kind of an unhelpful thing for women to try to obsess about. Success for me has really been a function of living into my purpose and living into my personal values. So that's looked different at different stages of my life. And to your, about how has it changed? I mean, I do think the younger version of Heather was much more chasing the next achievement. As I mentioned, I grew up in Carmel, but my parents had some financial challenges, and so I was always the kid in Carmel who didn't have the clothes and didn't have the car and was the one saving babysitting money to go to cheerleading camp, and those are all really good things, but it also sort of bred in me a little bit of an engine for how do I achieve and how can I get to that next level. And then what you start to learn throughout your life is there's no finish line. Right? That treadmill, that success treadmill never stops moving. So at some point you realize, well, what really is important to me, and who do I need to be on this earth? My faith is also very important to me. So, centering into that and realizing that, success is in here, and it's up here more than it is out there. And it took me a while to learn that, but once it kind of clicked for me, there's just a peace and an okayness that surrounds your life.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting because what I kept hearing the mayor's message say was her values. She went back to her values, and I heard that very similar thing. It's like, what are my values? So that's wonderful. Thank you.
I guess I don't really like using success because then there's failure too. I think for me, I set a goal, and if I can learn something from that, even if it just came together in a different way, I think that's like an achievement, I would say, versus a success. So I mean, and also just with some of the work that I do, some of the kind of hard conversations that I have to have, I think that me just kind of trying to keep myself rational, level-headed, balanced, I think if I'm not showing up for other people in a constructive and very thoughtful way, then, obviously that does more harm than anything. So for me, it's just trying to make sure that I'm also being very self-aware on how I'm approaching people, how I'm approaching situations. So I think for me, that's kind of a broad kind of mindset for myself.
That's great. Thank you.
I very much agree with you, Mayor. There is absolutely no such thing as balance. Mm-hmm. You cannot possibly balance being a mom, a wife, a business leader, community servant. The list goes on and on. Friends, everything. You just can't do that. Every day, every week, every season requires something different from us. And I think to me, success, being content with that. It's knowing your purpose, knowing your values, and knowing this season requires more. You can have a sick kid, you may be taking care of an ailing parent, or you may have a big business project due. That's okay. It comes and goes, and it comes in waves, and I think just being content with the flow.
Yeah. I heard being content, but I also heard being intentional in the right season of where to pour in and where to pour less. So that's great. I'm going to zone in now, and we'll come back to more general questions. So Heather, I'll start with you. You started your career as an educator. before moving into leadership development and consulting. What was the turning point that led you to make that transition, and how has your background shaped the way you lead today?
Well, my passion is still very much teaching and learning, but I think the turning point really came, I had the opportunity to take the Predictive Index Behavioral Assessment, which some of you may be familiar with. It's part of what we now do at Advisa. But when I had a chance to learn about how I'm wired and my motivating needs and my inherent strengths in a way that I hadn't really thought of it before, it was really like a veil was lifted. It sounds silly, but that really was the moment where I thought to myself, you know, I might not have to stay in public education. I might be able to take my strengths outside of that box, and you know, take my leadership abilities and do something outside of it. So I approached that consultant who shared that with me and said, you know, I don't know if you're hiring, but I know I can teach and facilitate, and based on what you just shared with me about my personality, I think I can sell. So if you're ever hiring, so that's the honest answer. You know, he said, oh, that's sweet kid, but we hire business people. And I was like, cool, that makes sense. But then he did call a couple weeks later, and I had the opportunity to interview at Advisa and joined the company as a trainer. So I still spent many years in the room with leaders and managers, teaching them how to use data about how people are motivated and wired to improve job fit, teamwork, coaching. So that's where I cut my teeth. And so, you know, it's probably self-evident that the teaching is still very much a part of what we do at Advisa. And my philosophy as a leader, I think we're always learning. The leaders in the organizations that learn the fastest are going to be most successful because our world is always changing. So continuous learning is a core value at Advisa, and it's a core value in my life as well.
Wonderful. It was interesting because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, self-discovery led to expanding your possibilities, but then you had to put yourself out there.
Yeah, and you heard Mayor Finkham mention it earlier. You have to take your shot. You know, life presents all kinds of little openings, little moments, little voices, and I do agree. Women especially, you have to step out there, raise your hand, ask for what you want, or, you know, the worst that can happen is you don't get it.
Right.
But, you know, to ask is to at least create the space that you might be able to take your life in a different direction.
Yeah, that's inspiring. All right, Consuelo, your journey from Guatemala to founding the Latinas Welding Guild is incredibly inspiring. What motivated you to step into this space, and what impact do you hope to leave on the women you mentor?
So when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to meet my biological family. I was able to see what it looked like for them to grow up, my younger siblings, my older siblings. And so I think it just kind of hit me like, you know, I was given up for adoption for a reason, and so I have to take the opportunity to just use this, I guess, new life of mine to make the most of it. So even if my family can't see it, it's like I want to leave some sort of legacy that hopefully they would learn about. But seeing all the women in my family, how they never really had a choice, they were just mothers, and kind of just like fell into kind of some just traditional machismo like roles. Like I think that for me, I was like, well, this is my opportunity. I could make something and hopefully would inspire other women in my family. So I am the most educated woman in my family, that I have a degree. And so for me, I'm hoping that my like younger nieces and nephews can see that and just really kind of know that they don't have to follow in their parents' footsteps. So that to me was really significant. Also just wanting to find a way to get back to Guatemala, whether that was doing something with art. Welding kind of just came at a right time where it made sense. Like, you know, Guatemala doesn't really have a big thriving economy. So for me, I'm like, well, maybe it could be welding. Maybe I could eventually open up an all-women's welding school in Guatemala. And then, you know, that would give women a completely new way of life, because there aren't really career paths outside of kind of stereotypical ones. So for me, that was really what I think inspired just kind of the work that I'm doing.
So inspiring. I heard legacy. I heard creating choices. I heard inspiring others. I heard creating a new path for others. You're a pioneer. Thank you for sharing. And then, Katie, as a leader in a historically male-dominated industry, what challenges have you faced, and how have you worked to create a leadership style that fosters both ambition and a fulfilling career?
I have spent most of my career in male-dominated industries. So my very first job, it was my dream job. I did corporate sales with the Indianapolis Colts. Now we have Kaylin and Carly running the Colts, so things are very different. But 20 years ago, as you can imagine, it was very, very male-dominated.
Sure.
And that did require, working harder than anybody else and putting in more effort. And I think that with a lot of things in life, it's mindset, right? I looked at it as a challenge and an opportunity. I didn't look at it as, I wasn't necessarily frustrated by it. I liked the challenge. And so I think that has really helped because as we continue to be in a male-dominated industry, I love an extra challenge. And I think the other part of that too is making sure that you're authentic, right? You have to be true to yourself. What society thinks is a normal president or a normal community leader or mom, it's not all cookie cutter. You don't have to fit into a certain stereotype. You need to be true to yourself. And that's really the only way for honest success. I don't think that you can be truly successful without going back to values and being true.
Yeah. And I love, it's hard work, right? And then it's that mindset of, oh, this is a challenge and an opportunity versus, oh, I can't do this because, and authenticity. That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, back to Heather. Hi. So if you could give your younger self one piece of advice about balancing ambition and fulfillment, what would that be?
Probably, and of course I've had time to think about this. The questions were given like 2 weeks ago, and I'm still wrestling with that. Probably do less but more. As women, I think we especially can just take on so much, right? People need things from us. We want to make our mark. We are passionate about different causes, et cetera. It goes on and on. And if I look back, I wish that I had known earlier that you don't have to do it all. You just have to do a few things well. And the other thing about less is more is that it helps you prioritize. That way you can feel confident and you can feel good about the things that you are doing, because I don't know about you, but I've had many times in my life where I've just felt spread too thin. Right? I'm not a good mom. I'm also not a good, leader at the business, and I'm not showing up for the PTA at school, and I'm not. That's when you know I'm doing too much. How do I pare that back so that whatever roles I'm choosing to play, wherever I'm choosing to put my energy, I can feel good when I put my head on the pillow at night that I've at least made an impact, the kind of impact that I want to make in those roles.
I needed that. That was, I'm like, yes, do less but more, be more intentional. I mean, it's all. How many of you ladies out there really feel like, man, I just can't keep up? Just raise your hands. Raise them high. I mean, it's a real struggle. It really, really is. And, I know this, but then I forget, and then I go back, and then I'm reminded again, and I needed that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Whew. All right. Consuelo. I love your name. Gonna lie to you. What's one unexpected lesson you've learned from working in welding and skilled trades that applies to leadership and life in general?
It's a tough one because I feel like I've learned a lot. So when I was growing up, it was constantly kind of like just told to us in school, like, go to college, go to college, go to college. Don't go to trades, like that was never discussed. And I think as a woman, like those options weren't really like presented maybe the same way that they would have been for like male students that I was going to school with. So, I already knew I was going to college, like, so that to me wasn't like, an issue. I was like, okay, I already know. And so, when I graduated college, I was like, okay, well, what other options, what additional education can I gain to really build off of my degree? And so I was like, oh yeah, I did like a couple welding projects. Maybe I should figure out what I could do with that, if anything. And then it just kind of opened my eyes to the world of welding. And so for me, I quickly understood that, there weren't a lot of women in the industry. There weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And then, everyone's like, well, you should get a mentor. And I'm like, yeah, there's nobody I can go, like, there's no one. So I kind of had to just rely on myself, and like I'd also just try to have conversations and kind of like filter out the things that made sense for me. But ultimately, it was like I feel like I just kind of had to learn on my own. But then it was nice because I would meet other women who might be like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Can you help me? And I'd be like, well, this is what I learned. So just being able to share that has been really great. But then also having conversations with groups and organizations that may never have invited me to do things. I've always had to just like basically build a chair at any table that I wanted, and I would just like force myself in there, which has been great because I think that especially right now, the industry is starting to slowly make some improvements, very slowly. And so for myself and my organization, like, we're finding all these niches where we can have these tough conversations, help educate people who might not know how to approach us, especially since our staff is like majority people of color. So for us, we can finally be a representation that none of us grew up with. And so I think that's been like really powerful, but also important to keep in mind that we need to have allies. So regardless of it being like a man, like there's still an ally. And then also being welcomed by the American Welding Society, which for those of you who don't know who they are, they're the national organization that sets the standards and codes across the country. And so they've always been very supportive. And so like I feel very honored, but they're also really including me in these intentional conversations to figure out how do we make improvements, because there's over 170,000 jobs opening up and so many people are retiring, so that number is increasing constantly. So for us, I already know like nationally the industry is made up of 30% diverse welders, and women make up about 5% within that 30. Here in Indiana, we're about 6% women in the industry, so obviously like we have our work cut out, but that's job security for us.
When you share, I have to be honest, you make me want to run a marathon. Like, you just get me so excited, and I don't like to run, so at all. But I also, what I keep getting from you is like, what other options are out there? Thinking outside the box, just possibilities. And it's beautiful. All right, Katie, if you had to describe your leadership philosophy in just 3 words, what would that be and why?
I think that I would sum it up with 3 core values. I would say integrity, service, and gratitude. Our team knows, I say this quite often, integrity is a non-negotiable. Trust, transparency, it extends business, personal. You cannot make a good decision. You cannot do anything in life without integrity. And it's just, to me, that is of the utmost importance. We know in our communication at Lucas Oil and in different correspondence, we say, we do the right thing, the right way, for the right reason. And so certainly integrity would be number 1. Number 2 is service. I firmly believe we are put on this earth to serve others. And that starts with servant leadership. It's actions. We lead by example all the time. One of my favorite quotes is, "What you do speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say." So service would be number 2. And then 3rd is really an attitude of gratitude. It's not feeling entitled. It's not putting unrealistic expectations on people. No matter how hard life gets, and it gets very, very difficult, there is always, always something to be grateful for. And really give that gratitude a voice. I think that's what's really important. Write it down, tell somebody. You just need to. It needs to center you. And in that token, I feel like one of the things that I talk about that I'm grateful for so much is the women that surround me. I have mentors, people to look up to, people to emulate. It's remarkable. And then I think that something that we're really proud of at Lucas Oil is the leadership team that we've built. The people we're surrounded by just so happens a lot of those leaders are women. Some we have today here with us today. But I think it's imperative that you surround yourself with people that lift you up. And I tell the boys, and I'm sure you guys tell your kids, be selective of who you're around, right? Because who you're around changes who you are, and you become those people. That doesn't change when you get older. You become who you hang around with. And so it's so important to surround yourself with like-minded people that are on mission with you.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, you do become who you spend time with. It's crazy because you start sounding like them, and yeah, it's so powerful. And those 3 core values that I heard you say, integrity, service, and gratitude, I have watched you live that out for years. You guys don't just preach it, but you truly live it, so it's pretty cool. Okay, so I had to leave the last question to be around boundaries. I had to save that for the end because in my list it was the second question, but I was like, no, we have to wrap up with this one. So this is for everybody, and that is, what is one boundary or habit you have put in place that has helped you maintain both professional ambition and personal fulfillment? So boundaries or habits that you've put in place that have really helped you maintain both the professional and the personal.
Yeah, I mean, it may sound cliche, but family first is really a boundary that, there are a lot of things I could be doing with my time. I spend a lot of time running my business, growing the business. So when I'm not at work, I'm spending time with my husband and my kids, supporting their endeavors. So it's not fancy. I'm not on a lot of boards. I'm not doing a lot of extra stuff because I'm still in that season where I want to be present for them and I want to make memories with them. So I would just encourage you to, again, look inward. What is it that is important to you? And then make that your boundary. That you're going to make decisions about where your time, where your money, where those things go in alignment with what matters most to you. I guess the other thing, about habits and boundaries, some people are wired up and they're very habitual and they're very disciplined that way. I've been more like a feather in the wind. I've had seasons where I've been good about exercising, and that's been a good release in a good way. I've had seasons in life where I've been really involved in Bible study, and that's been very important to me. I think as I look back, it's about what is important right now. And that might be different than what it was, when I was in my 40s or my 30s or my 20s. And that's okay, because that's the great thing. You get to decide what's important to you and then how you're going to spend your time accordingly.
Yeah, it's like reevaluate my values and then realign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it. That's good. Thank you.
So boundaries and...
I'll ask it again. What is one boundary or habit that you've put in place that has helped you maintain both your professional ambition and personal fulfillment?
That's tough because I agree with you. Yeah, I'll get into a habit and then it's really easy to kind of fall off.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I've been more recently more aware of and intentional about is giving myself some forgiveness and grace. I think right now, just with everything going on, that right now I think feels like a good habit for me to get into. But also just remembering that I don't have to know everything. Like, I know that, I'm running a nonprofit and there are other community groups that might look to some of us for some answers, but it's like the reality is I don't know everything. So that's kind of where the grace and forgiveness come in. Also, I've been trying to be more conscious, because I love working, so I will literally work every day. So I'm like, okay, well, not everybody else on my team wants to work, 7 days a week. So I need to also put up boundaries where I'm not potentially overwhelming my staff because I'm excited about one thing or 100 things. So recharging with my husband, so we're both creative. So that's a great way for us to kind of connect and just build things. And we have a lot of home projects like renovation things, so that keeps us busy sometimes.
I love that point out of I also set boundaries that will protect my people. that's a great leadership wisdom, we'll call it, of like, yeah, I don't just set boundaries for myself, but I also have to think about my people and what they need. Because sometimes I don't need the boundary because I'm fired up, but they need boundaries. So that's great. Katie, what about you? Do you want me to ask it again?
Well,
Okay.
I'm good. But I very much agree with what Heather and Consuela said. So I think I might take it a little bit different, so I don't read it, because what you guys said was wonderful. I think for me, as you continue to grow in your career or whatever you're doing, something that has been a learning lesson for me, because I admit I am a control freak, I want my hands in everything, is taking a step back. Having good people around you that can come in and help, and they may not do it the same way you do, but that's okay. And I think for me, it's been a challenge. It's something I'm still working through, but I wish I would have started that earlier. I spread myself way too thin because I couldn't take my hands out of it. So just little piece of advice that I wish I would have given myself when I was younger.
Yeah. And I heard you earlier, who you spend your time with matters. So it's like, surround yourself with the right people and then trust them to do it. That's such good wisdom. Okay, so as we wrap this up, is there anything else? This isn't on the list, but we have a few more minutes. So is there anything else you'd want to say to this group that's coming up? If not, that's okay. But since we have margin, I figured I'd ask.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time working with organizations to develop leaders, and a lot of time helping those organizations define what does effective leadership look like here and why. And I want to offer an encouragement to all the women in this room, because very often what we are hearing when we're doing that work, what we're not hearing is we need more discipline and we need more accountability and we need more. It's not the hard charging, sharp, edgy, typically male-dominated type leadership traits. What we hear when we talk to these leaders is we need more empathy. We need more kindness. We need environments that are inclusive and welcoming of all types of people. We need grace. We need So I just want to encourage the women in this room, because, anybody can do anything irrespective of gender. However, women do typically more naturally bring some of those more human attributes to leadership. And there's never been a time where those qualities have been more in need. So just remember, I think innately we bring something really important to the leadership table. And now more than ever, organizations are crying out for it. The other thing that I would say is this notion of well-being. We had a table out there and we had a statistic on one of our pieces of, a one-pager that we were handing out, but 26% of women surveyed said that their organizations don't care about their well-being. That's pretty staggering. And even if you just sit in your chair right now and go, does my organization care about my well-being as a woman? And so the other encouragement is you've got to take care of you so that you can take care of others and so that you can be effective. And so how can you make that a priority? Because you're worth whatever it is you need to do to make sure that you're well, mentally, physically, spiritually, relationally, all those things. So wellness and well-being are a really important part of this whole leadership conversation, especially as it relates to women.
I love the feminine leadership is needed right now, because that's really what I heard, is this feminine leadership, and that's what we bring to the table. Yeah. Anything that you ladies, yeah.
I would say don't be afraid to show up and just ask for help. I know I've been told so many times that every time I hear it, I'm like, okay, whatever, on to the next thing. So I would encourage people to just take that as like just nothing, just move on to the next thing. Because if I would have listened to all the no's, or you can't do it, or that's going to be impossible, there's no way, then I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Show up, ask for help, be vulnerable, put yourself out there. The world needs us to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just kind of piggyback off of what you said, Heather, with well-being. we always put ourselves on the back burner, always. And the advice is always to not do that. And this was a few months ago, I saw a quote that said, you need to pause and take a break, otherwise your body will do it for you, and it'll be at the most inconvenient time. And a week later, I had a major health incident because I wasn't taking care of myself. And so it's really a reminder, you have to do that. You have to pause. It's okay. Things will be okay. But because I've gone through that, I just want everyone to be armed with that. Your body will break if you don't put your needs at least somewhere on the priority list. Because as women, it's always the last thing. That's all I would say.
Yeah. And when we take care of ourselves, we are so much more full to be able to pour out into everybody else. You ladies are so inspiring. Thank you so much. What an honor it is to be up here with all three of you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I'm actually going to ask you just to sit for 2 more seconds. Just for 2 more, because we do have a little bit of time, so we can stretch. That's what they would tell me in my ear right now. So before we leave, I know that we've touched on so many different things, but one that I don't think we've talked about or mastered enough as women is pay equity. And because we have executives here, and we have advocates here, and we have entrepreneurs here, I want to ask all 4 of you, when it comes to asking for the number, whether you're the one asking or you're the one, checking it off the list for someone, how do you go about doing that? How have you been an advocate for yourself to making sure that you are financially well as well? So I'll start first with our moderator, and then maybe we can go down the line.
I think it goes back to my own value and knowing what my value is. And honestly, I have not had to ask because I've been an entrepreneur. I've led my own companies this whole time, but I've had to decide how to pay myself, which is actually harder, especially when you run a nonprofit, because you have this guilt of like, this could go back to women and this could go back. So it's kind of like, what is my value and what would I pay somebody who is doing what I'm doing? And why does that matter? So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my answer.
Yeah, I've both had to ask for what I feel I deserve to be paid, and I've been asked. So I think one of the things that's really important in that conversation is if you're going to ask for more money or advocate, you do need to understand your value, and you need to spend some time thinking about what are you bringing or contributing to the organization that merits that increase, and how is what you're asking for and what you bring related to the results and the strategic plans of the organization. Because to go in and just say, I'd like to make more just because, or it be comparative, even though sometimes those comparisons are frustrating. Men still predominantly make more than women, but that isn't often your strongest play when you're trying to advocate for that earning parity. Your strongest play is the value that you bring and your ability to articulate that and very clearly link it to what people in power care about. If you can do that and you can make the case for it, and then you can show up and deliver results on the back end of that, now you have the credibility, and now you've proven that you're worth what you are asking for. But I think a lot of times, especially young people, they don't have this sense of how to deliver the results, and they just want to make more just because, and that tends to not land as well as if you're anchoring it into what you're actually delivering.
I would say over the last couple years, I think that's been more of something I've been trying to be conscious about. I was running the nonprofit basically on a volunteer basis, like $0 coming my way for I think probably the first 3 years. And then it got to the point where I was having more conversations with more foundations, and like now I think even the mindset of like funders and other like grant awardees are starting to say, like, if the executive director isn't getting paid or they're not getting taken care of, like, that's a red flag. Like, the person that's leading that initiative should be like taking care of themselves, or because if the executive director isn't getting paid and they left, what would happen to the organization? It would fall apart. And then eventually the organization would have to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to pay a new executive director? So I think it was a really big struggle because, like you were saying, like, yeah, the money that goes to me for salary could be going to programs or could be going to somewhere else. But I think I had to make that like conscious mental shift. And then I also had another friend who was like, well, you know, men are never afraid of asking for money. So why are you afraid? And I'm like, I don't know. Not sure.
Goes to some of the mayor's point earlier that we're taught to just kind of be good and don't ask and just remain in your place, whereas maybe,
think it's
we're
like-
conditions elsewhere for guys.
Or be grateful.
Yes, be grateful. And yet gratitude does not pay my bills. So, Katie, same question
Yes,
to
I mean,
you.
I've been on both sides of it as well, and I think that it's, to your point, you cannot be afraid to ask. I've gone and asked, this is why I deserve more money, not because someone else is getting it or because, which our HR team is here can tell you, it's because I want a title or I want this or it's an expectation. But really showing your worth and also not being afraid to ask for more when you do that. I mean, I remember I was early on in my career and I wanted more. I wanted the next role. I wanted the next project. And you can't be afraid to ask because you know what? Most of the time you will get it. And I just think that you have to be empowered, know your worth, and not be afraid to back down from that. And we see it on the other end now is I never fault anyone for asking for more money. If they come with reason and value, I think it's wonderful. I applaud that.
Ladies, thank you so much to our moderator for leading us in this discussion in our panel. So let's give it up for them. So we're going to move forward in just a little bit. We want to give you a break to recharge and reset and continue networking. So we will get back here in this room at 2:15 for our keynote. Again, that's 2:15. So we'll have author Lisa Hendrickson to join us, and you won't want to miss it. So please, again, be in your seats and ready to go by 2:15. All right, welcome back here to everyone. Again, if you can hear the sound of my voice, we're going to get ready to start with our keynote address. And we do want to make sure that she can get all of your attention. So if you can make your way toward your tables, take a seat, and look toward our stage. In the meantime, another quick reminder for you as well, the postcards. How many of us have filled them out and had them collected? Good chunk. Sounds like yes. If you have not filled out that postcard yet to some of our middle schoolers, please be sure to fill it out. We really want to be able to use some of your encouraging words, your journey, your wisdom to the next generation. So be sure to go ahead and fill that out for us. We're going to have a final member in the purple t-shirt. Go ahead and collect those. All right, can you hear my voice? I'm going to have you clap twice if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right. So it is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Lisa Hendrickson. Lisa is a storyteller, historian, and communications expert whose work brings powerful narratives to life. She is the author of Burning the Breeze, 3 Generations of Women in the American West, a finalist for the Willa Literary Award in Creative Nonfiction and the Evans Handcraft Award. Her work has also appeared in Traces and Montana Historian, and she has contributed to Indiana's bicentennial storytelling series and efforts. Beyond her writing, Lisa has led a distinguished career in communications, media, and public relations, holding leadership roles at Park Tudor School, Ameritech, and PNC. She also worked as an executive producer and State House reporter in Indianapolis. That's not an easy thing to do. A graduate of DePaul University and Butler University, Lisa also studied French literature at Sorbonne Université, and she did so as a Rotary Scholar. She brings a wealth of insight, experience, and passion for elevating women's voices and stories. So please join me in welcoming Lisa Hendrickson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you so much to Mayor Finkam for inviting me to speak with all of you. I'm thrilled to be here at this wonderful She Leads conference. I'm here today, as Berchelle said, to tell you about 3 women in history who found their voices and helped lead the way for women's success today. It was interesting to hear the panel discussion earlier. I heard a lot of words that you'll hear in my talk, but I want you to kind of put on your way back hats now and think about the challenges you face today, and I'm going to tell you about the challenges that these women faced more than a century ago, and you might feel a little bit relieved about what you're facing right now. So you might be wondering, what can three unheralded women from the 19th and early 20th centuries teach us about leading and succeeding in today's world? You really might be surprised. So I spent 10 years, let me learn how to use this thing. There we go. I spent 10 years researching and writing my book, Burning the Breeze, 3 Generations of Women in the American West. The project was truly a labor of love. And during those years, I learned quite a bit about women, what women faced in the 19th and 20th centuries, the trials they faced. But I also learned valuable lessons about how these 3 pioneering women defied stereotypes of their time to carve their own successful paths. As for the title, Burning the Breeze, because many people ask me about that, it's American Western slang for riding at full speed, and that's exactly what these women did. Now, as you probably know, literature about the American West, literature and movies have most of the time been dominated by stories of cowboys and the men who tamed the West. Rarely do we hear about the stories of women and their accomplishments, and that's what I set out to do with this true story. So whenever I speak to a group about this book, usually one of the first questions I'm asked is, how did you learn about these women? Well, when this project was born, my brother lived in Montana, and every summer my husband and I would visit him. I had never been to Montana before he moved there, and I became fascinated with that state's history. But I've always been interested in the stories of women who defied the conventions of their era to accomplish extraordinary things. Some of you might remember the Childhood of Famous American series that was published right here in Indianapolis by the Bobbs Merrill Company. So Amelia Earhart, Phyllis Wheatley, Sacagawea, and Clara Barton were some of the women I loved to read about when I was a child. So when my brother told me that a friend of his hoped that someone would write a book about her grandmother, I, of course, asked about her accomplishments. And he told me that in the 1920s, she was the first woman to own and operate a dude ranch in Montana. I was intrigued. I had been looking for a writing project about a strong woman, and as I learned more about this dude ranch owner named Julia Bennett, I knew that I had found my 10-year project. So I started with the intention of writing only about Julia Bennett. But the more I dug into her story, the more research I did, and the more I learned about Julia Bennett's mother and grandmother, I realized it was not just the story of one woman, it was the story of 3 generations of strong, independent women. These women faced so much difficulty and tragedy in their lives, yet they managed to thrive. That's really what makes their stories so compelling. And the fact that Julia Bennett, her mother and her grandmother, managed to overcome so many hardships and heartbreaks is inspiring. They faced countless difficulties, untimely deaths, accidents, hunger, divorce, disease, even fire and murder play into the story. But what do their stories have to do with women's leadership today? Well, despite all they faced, they managed to find their voices. And the personal qualities that they embodied and how they stayed true to their qualities, these qualities, despite their hardships, remain relevant to all of us today. So to help you understand the personal beliefs and traits that helped lead them to success, I want to tell you about them. But I promise not to give too much away because you'll find out a lot more when you read the book. So this is Julia Bennett with her horse Apache in 1936 at her dude ranch, the Diamond J Ranch. But the story of these 3 women begins in Missouri in the 1800s, mid-1800s, with this woman, Lizzie Nave Martin, Julia Bennett's grandmother. In 1862, her husband David died of tuberculosis, and at the age of 27, she became a widow with a 7-year-old daughter to raise. At that time, the law in Missouri stated that after the death of a husband, a woman had the legal right to keep any personal property up to $200, but she was also required to pay back all of her husband's debts, which had included the cost of land that he had purchased. One historian has written that for many women, a husband's death brought his creditors down on the estate like vultures. David Martin's debts totaled $1,000 back then, which equals about $20,000 in today's money, and Lizzie had to find a way to repay them. Now, this was also in the middle of the Civil War, and although Missouri had declared itself neutral in the conflict, it was a slave-owning state. Lizzie's brothers fought in the Confederate Army, and her father was a supporter of the Confederacy. So in Missouri at that time, it was really neighbor against neighbor. One young Missouri woman wrote in a letter to her aunt, "Many of the Southern families have left." And although I couldn't uncover the details, it appears that some of Lizzie's family's property was confiscated. So they decided to head west to what soon would become the Montana Territory, which at the time had a population of fewer than 20,000 people. And so, in August of 1863, Lizzie Nave Martin, her young daughter Lulu, shown here, Lizzie's parents and some of her brothers and sisters and their children joined a wagon train of 500 people that departed from Atchison, Kansas. Their trip would take them 9 entire months. And although they were escaping the wartime conditions in Missouri, Lizzie was not escaping her debts. In fact, a public administrator was assigned to settle her husband's estate and sell his land. So with the limited amount of funds that she had left, she bought a wagon that she arranged to cover with 2 canvases for their journey across the plains, along with a yoke of oxen. And her husband's relative had donated a yoke of cows, which would provide them with milk during their journey. There would be constant stress along that 9-month route. No one knew what the next day would bring. Would they find clean water to drink for themselves and for their animals? Would they find animals to kill for food? Would they encounter storms? Would they encounter disease and illness? They had to cross raging rivers, and at times they had difficulty finding potable water. They feared herds of bison would trample them, along with Indian attacks. Now, while the threats and reports of Indian attacks were greatly exaggerated, the dangers of bison were actually very real. So in the spring of 1864, Lizzie and her daughter and most of the rest of the family, even though some turned back to Missouri in the middle of that trip, they arrived in the newly minted town of Virginia City, Montana. It was at the time it was in the Idaho Territory and now in Montana, and Virginia City was in the midst of a gold rush. It was filled with miners, and men outnumbered women by many percentage points. So the men in the Nave family went to work as miners, and Lizzie and her 20-year-old sister, Lucy Ann, knew how to sew. So they set up a dressmaking shop in their family's 2-room cabin. They had no sewing machine, so they had to make the clothing by hand, but they made it appear like machine stitching by taking the stitches and then filling the space in between the gaps with another stitch. And then they saved all the fabric scraps to make quilts and purses and small items that they could sell. Now in Virginia City, as you can see, imagine, it was a very tiny town. The streets were covered with dirt. There were mountains in the background. There was not much there. They endured a very difficult winter there. The snow was so deep that food supplies couldn't get through to the town. There was a flour shortage, and the family hid bags of flour in their mattresses and above the roof beams of their cabin. The flour they could manage to find and buy couldn't be trusted. Some of it was adulterated, some of it was fake and unsafe to eat. So, as you can imagine, not a great place to settle. So the following year, Lizzie and her sister and Lizzie's daughter set out from Virginia City on their own, just the 3 of them. And they drove a wagon about 120 miles north to another new mining town called Helena City, today Helena, Montana. There, they also made a living by taking in sewing and serving meals to miners. Now, when they were in Helena, the administrator that was handling Lizzie's estate managed to sell their farm back in Missouri. So with the earnings of those sales, she managed to pay off some of the debts, but she still owed hundreds of dollars more. So after only 5 months in Helena, in October 1865, Lizzie and her daughter set off again, this time just the two of them, and they were heading to an area south of Helena where her parents had moved to establish a ranch and operate a stagecoach stop. Lizzie had brought along enough lumber to create a small lean-to shelter, and then she and Lulu took the 4-day trip south where a freight wagon dropped them off. And as young daughter Lulu described it later, she said they were, quote, unloaded beside the road and at the mercy of Indians and wild animals, the place showing fresh signs of both. This will give you an idea of what that area looks like today. Still very unpopulated. We even have the abandoned pioneer cabin on the scene, but there was not much there at all. So they didn't stay in the Montana Territory for long. In 1866, the two of them headed to San Francisco via stagecoach and steamer, where Lizzie probably thought it was a place where she could earn enough money as a seamstress to repay her debts. But that trip was also quite a trial. They took it via, this is a picture of a valley in Montana, and you can actually still see the road, the tracks that the stagecoach used to drive on. So this is what it looked like as they were taking that trip. They had to go through Oregon's Blue Mountains in 25 feet of snow. And Lulu, the daughter, later recalled that at times our whole party had to get in dry goods boxes and ferry over streams by means of ropes tied to the boxes. And then women traveling without men faced yet another set of problems. One woman who wrote about her own stagecoach trip around the same time through the same region later met a man who told her that, quote, women had no business traveling in such a country, and railroad officials said that no woman could endure the hardships that conditions of travel then required. But Lizzie and Lulu did. So 1 year later, they returned to the Montana Territory in an equally rugged trip that would take 1 month and cost Lizzie more than $300, which is about $5,000 today. At the Montana Historical Society, where I did a lot of my research, I was able to unearth portions of a diary that Lizzie kept during that time. And I found she wrote many references to something, in quotes, it was lady company. So since Lizzie frequently met with other women in the boarding house where they were living in San Francisco, at first I thought those were shorthand references to these get-togethers. But then she also included the words lady company mentions during her stagecoach trip. And I noticed then that those mentions appeared about once a month. Aha. It was then that I realized that Lizzie was referring to her menstrual period. That, of course, led me on a trip down the rabbit hole to learn how women managed back then during that time of the month, which led me to the origin of the words on the rag. So, just imagine riding for months in a wagon train or on a stagecoach and having to deal with that. Something we probably haven't thought much about. So when Lizzie and Lulu returned to the Montana Territory to be closer to parents and other family members, the area was still very sparsely populated. So one of the few people that lived nearby in the area where they settled was a man whose name was Benjamin Franklin Bembrick. He was among the first cattle ranchers in the region, and he later became known as the area's cattle king. When Ben was just a teenager, he and his two brothers had headed west from Missouri to seek their fortune during the California gold rush. Then later, he became a buffalo hunter to feed people who were traveling west with the Overland Stage Company. Now, Ben was a widower. His Indiana-born wife had died after giving birth to their daughter. And when she was only 15 years old, Lizzie's daughter, Lulu, married him. He was 43 at the time. So 3 years later, in June 1876, Lulu gave birth to their first child, a daughter, in the middle of a raging rain and snowstorm when the snow had reached as high as 2 feet. Her husband, Ben, may not have even been there when she delivered the baby because he was often gone for months at a time in the summer tending to his cattle in a neighboring valley. So Lulu was now there to care for their new young daughter named Lizzie after her own mother, as well as Ben's now 7-year-old daughter named Addie. Lulu would go on to have 4 more children, one of whom died a month after he was born. Here's a photo of the entire family at their ranch, which is what's called the Circle J. And so while Ben was out on the range most of the summer, in addition to caring for the children, it was up to Lulu to oversee the ranch. Her work included raising fruit and vegetables, canning, cooking, milking cows, churning butter, baking bread, feeding the ranch hands, doing laundry, making clothes for the family, and tanning deer and antelope hides for their clothes. She learned how to bead and sew buckskin from a Native American woman who lived nearby. She also kept the books for the ranch operations. And at the request of a dying friend, she took in a young woman who had lost her sight after an eye operation. That woman would later become the children's piano teacher. And Lulu also set up a classroom in the family's ranch and hired the teacher. Now, although Lulu's own schooling had ended as a young girl when she was in San Francisco, her daughter, Julia Bennett, said her mother, quote, wrote a good hand, was a good reader, and could spell any word given her. She was also a member of a local literary society, which was made up of ranch families who lived in the area, and they would gather to read and discuss books. By the way, as an aside, because I just love this story, one of Lulu's good friends was a woman named Ann Williams, whose daughter Myrna would grow up to become the movie star Myrna Loy. And this is a picture of Myrna Loy at 4 years old that was in the family scrapbook. So later, much later, Julia Bennett and her own daughter would take a trip to Hollywood to go to a party at Myrna Loy's house, but that's a story for another day, although it's a good one. So when Lulu's own children were older, she also helped run a mercantile store and became a milliner, making large dramatic hats in the style of the day. And I don't know how hard it is for you to see these pictures, but if you can take a look at those mile-high hats, those are the kind of hats that she made. So also in 1905, Lulu purchased 80 acres of her own, perhaps hoping to avoid the trials that her own mother had faced in earning enough money to repay her husband's debts, which Lizzie eventually did manage to repay those. By now, Lizzie had remarried, but she remained independent. She told a newspaper reporter at the time that she was planning to raise carp in a pond on the property, and the reporter meant that Lizzie means progress when she undertakes anything. This was in 1889, the same year that 2 petitions for equal suffrage were presented at the territory's Constitutional Convention. Now, 2 years earlier, the women's suffrage movement had begun to take hold, and Montana's territorial legislature had granted female citizens the right to vote for school trustees in their district. That was all they were allowed to vote for. In fact, one popular author of the time, whose name was Marietta Holley, created a character named Samantha Allen who said this about the equality of the sexes. Give a woman as many fields to work in as men have, and as good wages, and let it be thought just as respectable for them to learn their living as a man too. So also in 1889, that same year, Montana became a state, and its citizens gained the right to vote for President of the United States. Its male citizens, that is. Now, Lulu's daughter, Julia, who later would become Julia Bennett, the ranch owner, she didn't care what women were supposed to do. She loved to hunt, she loved to ride horses, and when she was 12, her father let her ride her cutting horse to the roundup, where she helped the wranglers separate the cattle and drive them back to the ranch. That's Julia kneeling at the bottom with the rifle. She and her sister would sneak out of the house in the middle of the night to ride cows and pigs, pretending that they were circus performers. And every Saturday, they would ride their horses 18 miles to the nearest post office to pick up the family's mail. They had to cross the Missouri River to do that, which required them to hike their skirts up around their waist as they rode their horses across. Julia wrote later, "We had a ferry later, but it wasn't half as much fun." She was also a very good student, and after graduated from high school, she took classes at the Helena Business College. Now, Julia married relatively late for that era. This is a photo of her that I actually found at the Montana Museum of the Rockies. She was 20 when she married a man named Anson Bennett, who was the son of a neighboring sheep rancher. Julia later wrote that her mother had made the match. It was not a love match. And in fact, one Montana ranch woman said, "There were darn few marriages of love out here among these early beginners. Love wasn't a part of it, it was survival." So Julia and her husband Anson had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and she lost 2 others in childbirth. Here is Julia with her son Don, and then Julia with her son Don, and then she had another daughter. So Julia's husband Anson was a railroad contractor, and he was away from home for long periods of time. But Julia's parents set him up in a general store in the town of Toston, and I have been to the town of Toston, and it still looks like this. This is it's one road, and their general store is right in the middle. But Anson was away from home. He had a drinking problem. He's a womanizer. So she decided to leave him, and she took the children with her. She tried working as a stenographer for the state legislature and as a Fuller brush salesman, which at the time was advertised as a man's job. Then she found temporary work cooking for summer guests at ranches. She was very well suited for that. And at one of the ranches, she met a wheat trader from Chicago who told her that when she was ready to run a ranch of her own, he would loan her the funds to start it. Now, guest ranches, as later became known as dude ranches, had gotten their start in the late 1800s when the expanded railroad system made the West more accessible to Easterners. And ranchers who needed the money saw an opportunity and began charging for room and board. One newspaper reported that the Dude Ranch got its name because of the type of people it attracted, wealthy New Yorkers who wanted the experience of roughing it. But dude ranches really took off in the 1920s when ranchers were having an increasingly hard time supporting themselves, so they teamed up with railroads to promote trips to the West. Now, I mentioned that Julia loved hunting, and this is a picture of her with her hunting friends, and she has written "My First Elk" there, and there's an elk on the ground in front of her. But she often went hunting in the mountains with a longtime friend, and one day in the fall of 1928, they stopped at an abandoned ranch set in a beautiful Montana valley. She thought it would be the perfect place for a dude ranch. She wrote that the country was wild, beautiful, and the hunting was wonderful. On that trip, she shot and killed a 500-pound bear, which earned her a newspaper write-up with the headline, "Woman Kills Bear." So Julia took a good hard look at the ranch property that she saw. Although the farmhouse was abandoned, she thought it had good bones, but there were 2 major obstacles. She didn't know who owned it, and she didn't have any money to pay for it. But nothing seemed to daunt her. Instead, as she put it, I got busy. So she managed to track down the owners who lived in Tacoma, Washington, and she contacted them about buying the property, even though she didn't know how she would get the money to pay for it. But her sister's husband had recently died and left her sister a bit of money, and her sister said that she would loan it to her. So Julia bought the property, and then she hired wranglers who were out of work to begin fixing up and building the guest cabins. Here's a very early picture of the ranch in the early 1930s. But in October 1929, the Great Depression started when the stock market crashed. It was a very bad time for Julia to try to start a business and attract people from the East who had money to spare for a vacation. That didn't deter her either. So when the spring of 1930 rolled around, she borrowed money to visit that wheat trader in Chicago who had told her that he would help her. She planned to ask him for that loan that he had promised. She got there, and he informed her that he too was now broke. So when she returned to the ranch, she found the logs for the cabin piled in a high pile next to the farmhouse covered with snow. The workers had moved on to another job because they weren't getting paid. But she wrote, "I had borrowed so much money that I just felt I had to build the ranch." So she came up with another idea. She used her powers of persuasion to convince a group of 5 local businessmen to finance her project. This was at a time when women couldn't borrow money from a bank in their own name or even have their own checking accounts. Then she decided to head to New York City, where she had never been, to convince and find and convince people to come to her guest ranch. This was in 1931, still in the middle of the Great Depression. There were very few people who could afford to stay there, and she had to find them without knowing anyone. So in the middle of winter, she took a train to New York City. She wrote a brochure. She brought along photos of the ranch and a film that she had managed to make. And she put on what she called a show at her hotel. She only had enough money to eat 1 meal a day. She managed to book 9 guests for that summer. But then there was the next summer to worry about and more guests to find. So she headed back to New York that winter. She wore Western clothes so she could show off how people dressed in the West. She brought along saddles and other ranch paraphernalia, and she managed to meet the man who ran a ticket office at a train station and arranged to have those things displayed in the window of a railroad ticket office along with her brochures. Now, here's one of my favorite stories about Julia Bennett's determination and persuasion skills. A doctor had provided her with a letter of introduction to 14 Manhattan physicians. So she telephoned the first one on the list, and she told the receptionist that she wanted to speak to the doctor about booking her ranch for the summer. The secretary told her that he was too busy to meet with her. So she devised a new strategy. She called the next doctor's office on the list, and she asked to see the doctor. She didn't say why. She just said, "I need to see the doctor." So the receptionist kept her sitting in the waiting room all day. Didn't see the doctor. She came back the next day, sat in the waiting room the entire day, didn't see the doctor. On the 3rd day, she showed up again. And finally, the doctor himself called her into his office, and he asked why she was there. She showed him the letter of introduction, and she explained that she wanted to tell him about her ranch, the Diamond J. She said he laughed, and she said, I showed him the pictures, and we were busy hunting and fishing when the receptionist came in and said, "Doctor, you have many patients waiting." And he replied, "I wouldn't have missed seeing this girl for anything." So you can tell that she obviously had much charm and many marketing skills. So Julia spent 2 months visiting the doctors on that list, and she said she almost starved. But she wrote, "I did manage to get some good bookings." She also managed to get some good publicity in publications like the New Yorker magazine, the New York Evening Post. This is a whole article about her dude ranch, which resulted in even more bookings. And then more publicity. For example, this is a photo of Julia with a Crow Indian chief named Chief Max Big Man, who Julia happened to know from Montana. He happened to be in New York on a tour, and a photographer at their hotel saw them dressed like this and said, "Why don't you come up to the roof of the hotel and I'll take your picture?" That's the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in the background, which was new. So, and Chief Max Big Man is making a sign here that means "Buffalo all gone," because of course by then most of the buffalo had been killed. Ironically, many of them by Julia's own father. So Julia spent several winters in New York. She made cold calls, she generated publicity about herself, And she even met and hired a young Texan who was playing a singing cowboy in a play on Broadway called Green Grow the Lilacs, which later would be turned into the musical Oklahoma. And she hired him to sing at one of her shows. His name was Tex Ritter, and he later would become a famous movie star and nationally known singer. Here's yet another article that she managed to get about herself in the New York World Telegraph. So although she did make a go of it, attracting guests in the summer, it wasn't enough to support her and her family for the entire year, because in Montana, there are long winters and the season only lasted about 3 months. So she needed a stable source of income for the rest of the year, and she decided to try to find a ranch in Arizona where she could entertain guests in the winter. So one of the guests at her summer ranch happened to be the wife of George Westinghouse Jr., who was the son of the famous inventor. They happened to own a ranch in Tucson among many houses that they owned. And so Julia asked if she could possibly rent their ranch in Tucson. Well, Mrs. Westinghouse told her, "I don't think my husband will rent it to you, but you'll have to ask him." So Julia took a trip to their home in Vancouver, Washington, where she once again used her powers of persuasion and convinced George Westinghouse to lease it to her. So now she had a ranch called the Diamond W in Tucson that is still there, but it's run as a rehabilitation center now. She had the brochures, and so then she had to go start finding guests for this ranch in the winter, but she would also get her previous guests from the summer to stay there. And at the end of each season, she would pack up and drive all of her equipment and her horses from one ranch to the other. She was genuine, she was hardworking, and she wanted to make sure her guests had the time of their lives. So she told them, "Do what you please, and I will help you do it." But she also did a little convincing. For example, there was a famous photographer for the cartoonist for the Chicago Tribune whose name was Cary Orr, and he stayed at Julia's ranches several times. Here is a cartoon on the left that he drew, and it's really hard to see. It's not great quality, but I will tell you, Cary Orr has drawn himself lying on a lounge, resting, and Julia is grabbing his hand, saying, "Come, let's do this, let's go here, let's do this." And he kept saying, "No, no," and everybody called her "Go, go." So here's another picture of her leading guests on a trail ride at the Diamond W. And she knew how to have fun. She would throw huge parties at her ranches with live orchestras. She even shipped venison from her Montana ranch for a New Year's Eve party at her Tucson ranch. Here are some flyers for these big dances. At the end of the season, every year at the Diamond J, she would have a huge barn dance. She would invite all the guests. She would invite all the people who lived in the community. And you will see the time, this party ran from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning. So many well-known people stayed with her, including the photographer William Henry Jackson, who was the first person to photograph Yellowstone during the initial 1872 expedition to explore that region. Her guests also included the nationally known ventriloquist and radio personality Edgar Bergen, the father of Candace Bergen, who drew a cartoon of his dummy partners Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd in her guest book. That's a picture of Julia with Edgar Bergen and what he wrote in her guest book. So I wish I had met Julia. I know I would have liked her. And when I read the comments that people wrote in her guest book, it was so clear that she was beloved by her guests. And she was clearly loved by her grandchildren who she helped raise. She never mentioned frustration. Like her mother, she was a Christian Scientist, and her faith helped keep her grounded, optimistic, and confident that with hard work, she would succeed. She believed in the teachings of the founder of Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, who wrote, "If you wish to be happy, argue with yourself on the side of happiness. Take the side you wish to carry, and be careful not to talk on both sides, or to argue stronger for sorrow than for joy. You are the attorney for the case and will win or lose according to your plea." So these women did have faith in a spiritual sense, but they also had faith in their own abilities. And Julia's granddaughter, who is now in her 80s and lives in Arizona, told me, I never heard her say, woe is me. Nothing stopped her. She cruised right through. So Julia sold her ranches when she was in her late 60s, but she continued hunting into her 80s and shot her last elk at the age of 84 on a hunting trip with her grandson. And in July of 1969, she watched television coverage of the first moon landing. Then she went outside to stare at the moon. Asked later by her grandson what she was thinking, she said, that same moon had watched her and her sister swimming their horses across the Missouri River at the turn of the century. And at that time, that trip had seemed like such a feat, and now people were actually standing on the moon. Julia died in 1971 at the age of 91. As we sit here today, who knows what will have changed in our world in the next 150 years. But it's a pretty good bet that the qualities that these women embodied will remain true, just as they do today. So I hope that the experiences of these three pioneering women will inspire all of you as you continue your own journeys. Thank you. And I will say, we don't have time for questions, but I will be at the reception following this, so if anybody has any questions, would like to ask, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for reminding us here of some of the power of resilience that we've seen with women across generations. Thinking of things that maybe today we take for granted, opening a bank account, getting a credit card, getting a home, getting a business loan, all of which these women did and in a revolutionary way. So thank you for sharing that. And there's a lot of key takeaways that we got here today, and you're gonna keep one physically. There's a special gift for each of you. So you'll receive a copy of Burning the Breeze, 3 Generations of Women in the American West. And yes, ooh, I heard all the excitement. We get now a reading club of 300 women. That's what we just established here. Just, attaching ourselves to more commitments. But it does give us a chance to dive deeper into some of these remarkable women's stories. So Lisa, thank you for not just sharing your story with us, but sharing a piece of your work too. All right, to close out our event here, yes, we can clap for that. To help close out our event now, we'd like to welcome back Mayor Sue Finkam to give some final remarks.
Thank you so much for taking part of your day to spend with us. I've heard such positive feedback from all of you, and I hope you're taking something away that you can use to better yourself, to lead, to make our community stronger. It's been fun meeting many of you, so if I haven't had a chance to meet you, please come say hi at the reception and help me find ways to do more for you, whatever that may be. I know we have brilliant ideas sprinkled throughout the room, so please find a way to get them to me. My email's everywhere. But please take time to give us your feedback on how today went and how we can make it better, and any other ideas you have to build this community, because this is not a one and done. This is just the first step in a long ladder where we will rise. So thank you so very much for spending time today with us. It's my honor.
So we've had a powerful day here at the She Leads Conference. We want to again make sure we're thanking our presenting sponsor, Duke Energy, and all of our sponsors really, so we'll give them a round of applause. And I do want to make sure for those in the back who can hear our voices that we're thanking them as well at the 502 East Center for all of the work they've done in creating this beautiful space for us and making sure that they are working to make sure we had amazing meals and desserts, which I see a lot of plates that are not yet touched. Please touch those dessert plates because they are amazing. So again, a round of applause for the wait staff with us here who have taken care of us so well. And before we conclude, we have a little bit of a raffle, so I'm going to have you take on over this part.
Yep. Okay, so you may have seen in the programming that we will be giving away two 90-minute, Advisa, my company, will be giving away two 90-minute leadership coaching sessions. So I've got a couple tickets that I've drawn here, and I think you had tickets when you came in. But just to give you a little context on the value of these, I mentioned in my remarks when I was on the panel the power of self-awareness. We believe that self-awareness is really the cornerstone of confidence and influence for women, for men, for everyone. And confident, self-aware leaders are able to do what they do with a growth mindset, surrounding themselves with people they can learn from. And leaders who lack self-awareness tend to kind of feign confidence and avoid people who will outshine them. And so I think we've already experienced today, this is a room full of people who want to lift each other up, and we want to be in the midst of other people that we can learn from and grow. So that's why we thought these coaching sessions would be a really valuable thing to give back to all of you. So I'll just go ahead and read these numbers, and then if you are the lucky winner, I don't know what the plan exactly is supposed to be, but you can just find me, and I will make sure that we get you in touch with one of our executive coaches so that you can schedule that coaching session. Okay, actually, I just got information. You can come up to the stage. Okay, so we'll photographic evidence, like she said. Okay, so the first ticket that I drew is 5577027. So if that's you, come on down, like the Price is Right. And then the second ticket, 5577007. Is that anyone? 027 and 007. Come on up, yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay, are we doing a photo? Okay. All right. Congrats. Thanks. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Good to meet you. Yes.
Thank you, Advisa, and congratulations to the two ladies here. And with that, we're going to wrap things up for our day and, of course, move into the middle school portion. But we hope that you stick around. Please continue fellowshipping, networking with each other. And I'll do a shameless plug here because I know there's so many innovators and entrepreneurs. As you guys are leading your businesses and things are happening in your community, please reach out to me. My email is edme@fox59.com because I know I can't meet with all of you. I do have to head to the next newscast. Or you can always find me on News Lady B on social media, or It's News Lady B, to make sure that we're connected and I get to share more of the amazing stories that are happening here. So again, thank you all for joining us. We hope that you rejoin us next year and have a great day.